Hi, everybody. My name is Kat Margulis, and welcome to the Power of Story. We've got author David Mark here today. David has spent more than 15 years as a journalist, including 7 years as a crime reporter with the Yorkshire Post, walking the Hull streets that would later become the setting for the Detective Sergeant Aector McAvoy novels. Did I pronounce that right?
Close enough. Close enough. Yeah.
David has written 11 novels in the McAvoy series, including Dark Winter, Dead Pretty, and Cold Bones. His first historical thriller, The Zealot's Bones, was a Sunday Times Book of the Year. And with publisher Severn House, he has written the critically acclaimed thrillers The Burying Ground, A Rush of Blood, Borrowed Time, Suspicious Minds, Cages, and The Whispering Dead. He's been championed by such industry luminaries as Val McDermid, Peter James, Mick Heron, and Martina Cole. His work has been translated into several languages, and his debut novel was an Amazon and Sunday Times bestseller. His first work of nonfiction, a mental health memoir detailing his battle with depression and addiction, was released in last September. Peace of Mind has been described as lyrical, raw, brutal, and very funny. David, I'm so excited to chat with you about writing, about crime, mystery, thriller, and memoirs, and the writing life and publishing today. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. I almost sounded impressive from that. That was yeah. It does not does pay to occasionally have those moments of semicolon in your life where you just take a pause and just look over your shoulder and think, oh, I did that. Wow. Before
Yeah,
moving forward again.
totally.
So that was a nice little précis of
Yeah,
my
I was very impressed reading all of that about you, David.
yeah, I haven't let it change me. I'm still an idiot. So
I love it. Well, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of background, which is that I did a course on how to write a psychological thriller. And I actually didn't intend to write a psychological thriller at the time, but I wanted to learn from this genre and from the masters of that genre so I could tell the most compelling story. I really wanted it to be page turning. And so I think no matter what story, what book, what genre you're writing in, we can pull if it's a memoir, if it's nonfiction, even you can pull different things from different genres to make it more powerful. And so that's really why I wanted to bring David on today is learn from him, learn from these genres, but also so interesting that David has recently pivoted into nonfiction and memoir. So we're going to go there as well. Um, so, so to start, David, um, I'd love to ask you what's unique about writing crime and mystery and thriller in those genres? How is it different than writing anything else? That might be a bit.
yeah. Well, essentially, any story, any group of happenings, any remarkable event, can be told in a dozen different ways. But if something requires a death, if the story involves a death that perhaps is in suspicious circumstances or before its time, or that is a remarkable death, then that by definition, unless it becomes an exploration of the human soul, then that necessitates a certain structure. So if we start with a body and people are asking questions, what happened? There's a certain agreement between you as a writer and this reader that over the course of the next 80, 90,000 words, you're going to explore this person's life and come up with a conclusion as to the circumstances of their death, provide some element of restitution and justice. So there's a very pleasing arc to that particular story trope. And as long as you hit certain beats along the way, you can, well, I can, I like to think, explore all those slightly more literary aspects of existentialism, metaphysicism, trying to work out, who we are, what we're for, and what we're doing. Um, it's a way to put characters into a situation that is by definition quite fraught, quite tense. You every scene that you take your protagonist into, the emotions are by definition high, and they have a duty within that chapter to find something out, or to elicit a piece of information, or there's a very steady progress through the course of a police procedural novel. Now, within police procedure, there are so many other genres that are part of that, but it is basically start with a body, end with a resolution. And as long as you've got those two things, publishers will invariably put crime in front of your name, and that's where they'll put you on the shelf in Borders. So it's sometimes you have a writer who doesn't know they're a crime writer, who's busy writing these quite intriguing explorations of the self, and then they walk into a bookshop and they find that they're a best-selling crime novelist. Um,
I
whereas,
love it.
so yeah, a lot of it is for the market, and as long as you don't object to having a slightly crimey front cover, then it's kind of a sticking plaster that means that if you look underneath, you can see all sorts of other things going on. And I'm vastly more interested in things like love and grief and the harm we do one another in the pursuit of the good we're trying to do one another, and all of those slightly more literary aspects. But I've never worked out how to write a literary novel because I like my books to have events, like
Oh, I love
like
that.
occurrences. I like there to be an element of drama. Whereas whenever I sit down and think, well, I'm going to write an exploration of the self, I just get this awful vision of people at a dinner party talking about themselves for days upon end. And I don't really want to be that writer. That could be consumed with cold pressed extra virgin olive oil is not the world I want to be a part of. So yeah, I think I
I
naturally lean towards crime.
I love so much about that, and I'm thinking about all like my brain is automatically cataloging all those movies. What are those satire movies about the dinner party? There's so
Oh
many. Like
God,
there's a
yes,
French one, and there's I think the American version of the French one, which is
yeah,
like all
yeah.
those hoity-toity
It's
dinners.
I'm a big fan of pretension in its place, but I just sometimes I'm from a very working class background, and I'm a Northern Englishman, which means that by nature we distrust the slightly pretentious, elevated. Like even art, it has to be kind of representative of something, otherwise it's just it's just froth. So yeah, I think that possibly by writing about crime, I get to have some earthiness within my work that allows almost gives me permission to explore the froth for myself,
I
really.
love it. This is why
So
we get along so well.
yeah, yeah,
But I love
because
it because I never thought of, to be honest, I don't normally, that's why it was so odd for me to take that course because I don't read those genres. And I always
yeah,
just thought of them the same way I do of like a Harlequin novel, like it's very genre and um contrived and not authentic. But I'm hearing you have a completely different come from. So hearing you talk about those genres as a writer, not a
yeah.
reader, is really fascinating.
Well, to me, I mean, as a journalist, I over many years I developed very quickly a news sense, like a prioritization of points of the things that you know how it is. If you go out for the day and a series of things happen, and and you come home and you go to tell somebody else about those happenings, you'll start with the most interesting and you'll end with the most dull. That at least I'd hope you
Mm.
would. Otherwise, you're a terrible storyteller. Um, and I'm a great believer in that we all have that. We know this will make a good story, and it's the same when you're a journalist. You find something out, and you find something else out, and you find something else out, and the most interesting bit, the remarkable part of your day, that can be a novel. That can invariably be a novel. But there's nothing more interesting than finding out that somebody has been murdered. There's nothing more interesting than that. Um, you know, let's be honest. If you're in the pub and somebody comes in and says, how's Sheila? And like, oh, yeah, she's been a bit down. She's not so happy. She's really struggling. She didn't get that payout she was hoping for. Oh, that's quite interesting. But if somebody comes in and you say, how's Sheila? And they say, she's dead. Right? That's a drink dropper. That's a moment that go, bloody hell, what happened? And bloody hell, what happened
Oh,
is the beginning of your novel, um, because that's what you want to know. for all that we rail against the press and we hate about some of the the worst excesses of the media, when we hear something remarkable has happened, we want to know why. Um, so just drop in a protagonist, take them for a walk through that world, and the bits that stick to them, they're your chapters. And along the way, you can explore the knock-on effects. What's happened? Did they live a good life? Did they live a bad life? Does it matter either way? All of those bits that most people with a creative soul are awake trying to work out at 2 a.m. You can just litter your novel with that. And as long as your editor likes you, they will survive the process and they will eventually be out there in the world. And somebody will read it and go, oh, that's interesting. What a good story. And other people will kind of forget who died and why, but they'll enjoy the time spent in the novelist's head or the time
Mm,
spent in a character's head. And, you can read it at two different levels.
yeah.
Or at least you should be able to, yeah.
Um, so it's so funny because all those little bits are the parts that I can really spend a lot of time on and I can
Yeah.
spin out on. Those are my favorite things to explore as a writer. How do you um how do you keep writers, because you teach it and you mentor, how do you
Yeah.
keep writers on track?
It's a difficult one to get right because sometimes writers are by definition, um, quite fragile creatures. Everybody creative is quite fragile. The, but you have that fragility coupled with a kind of quiet ambition and need to be seen. There's something there's something incredibly courageous about essentially slamming your heart down into a page and making a Rorschach out of it and saying, "There you go. What do with that as you will." Um, so I don't ever want to curtail people's expression when they're writing because it's important. It's important that it comes out. It's important that all of that's in you finds its way onto the page. But similarly, you always have to write for the reader, or certainly you have to publish for the reader. You can write as much as you want. Write a book that's 3 times as long as it's ever going to be when it hits the shelf. But you have to make, if you're going to inflict your work upon the reading public, then you have to put them before yourself. I spent 10 years unable to get published because I was essentially obsessed with showing people how clever I was. Um, and that that was the thing that held me back more than anything else.
And how
When I
did you get
stopped
out of
trying to
that?
show how clever I was and started to write a book that people might enjoy, um, that was a major turning point for me. And yeah, it was it. When the penny finally drops, you're like, oh yeah, yeah, that's um, I'd I'd write these incredibly elaborate, beautiful, dark, miserable works, just page upon page of, essentially up to date French poetry. And it was artistic, and it played into the idea of the tortured soul. But it was all aesthetic. It was all me living within my own narrative. It was me playing the part of the tortured writer. And at some point, you've got to grow up and drop that and say, look, if you want to get a book on a shelf, you're going to have to write something that people get involved with and engaged by. So that was my own journey. So now I have to do that with other writers,
Yeah.
and I'm always like, look, let's just see. If you've written a paragraph that doesn't give us anything new, doesn't move the plot forward, then consider that you might not need that paragraph. And it might be a great paragraph, but ask yourself if you're leaving it there for you or for the reader. Um, and if you spend 3 pages describing the sunrise, ask yourself if you could do it with maybe just a couple of sentences. Once
Mhm.
you know it's sunny, you can you can kind of let it go. So yeah, it's essentially the way I teach is I hope other people learn from my mistakes because I've made many, and a lot of it has been out of arrogance and hubris and ego and all the things that if you're creative you should have in abundance. It's that thing of how dare you judge me, please judge me. It's and it never leaves you. I'm 16 books into my career, and I just got my notes back on the book before this one, from my editor, page after page of questions, and all I want to do is just shred it and drive to London and kill him. Um, how dare you? How dare you ask me these totally pertinent questions that improve my novel, you bastard. So yeah, that doesn't leave you, believe me.
No.
So yeah, in answer, that was a very long answer to a very short question, but um, there is a mixture between allowing people to express themselves, but also realizing that there is a certain trajectory to a novel. You do have to
Mhm.
know a little bit where you're going,
How
or
do
at least
you how do you how do you do it? How do you encourage other people? Do you just say write the book you want to write first draft and then the
oh
second
yeah,
draft you
don't
write it for a reader? Is that your approach or?
well, look, I've taught hundreds of people now. It's quite bizarre, really, but and I do the thing that causes most people heartache is that they reach 20 or 30,000 words of a project that they adored absolutely. It consumed their every waking thought, and then they've reached 20 or 30,000 words, and they suddenly don't adore this anymore. They want to go back and rewrite the start. um, they want to, or worse, they want to throw it away and write another book that has occurred to them recently, which is a better book. And it's the project that this will be the one. And what they're essentially doing is putting off the horror of what happens when you finally finish a novel and have to do something with it, and it no longer exists in a state of potentia. It now exists in a state of reality. And the longer you can put that off, the safer you are in your heart. So and you get the dopamine of starting a new project, and that is the biggest challenge for me as a mentor, and as a coach, to say to people, look, writing the next book is your reward for finishing this one. There was a point when writing this book was the most important thing to you on earth. What you've done is frightened yourself, and what we need to do now is help you past that obstacle and allow you to fall back in love with the middle of a book, or allow you to fall in love with the idea of an ending to a book. But the idea of loving the totality of a book for the totality of writing it is an impossibility. I'm at 40,000 words of my work in progress, and I've just got over the bit that I hated, just utterly hated. What this stupid idea, hate the characters, stupid setting, started it in the wrong place. Why am I doing this anyway? What's the point? It's only going to sell 3,000 copies. I don't get paid very much for this. Why am I bothering? Chuck it out. Um, you know, let's go. I'll go and pretend that I'm James Patterson, um, and I'll go and write something that's absolutely cack but makes loads of money. Um, that's and it's quite difficult to maintain that sense of, yeah. You get lost in your own bullshit. So all you got to do is just accept the fact that you hate this chapter, you'll hate the next chapter, but the chapter after that, that's really exciting. If I can just get past this bloody chapter, the next one, then it's fun. We've broken the halfway point, and we're rolling on towards the climax. And that's the bit that, as a writer, brilliant.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's getting out of your own way. That's the hardest part. And
Yeah.
you know, I suppose I'm quite fortunate in that if people have paid me to be their mentor, they've got the choice of either listening or not. Um, and you've paid me for my expertise, so I'd like to think
Mhm.
that you can you can take it on board. But there's so many people who say, well, I take all that on board, but I'm just going to rewrite the first chapter of the one I'm working on, which invariably changes the tone of the
Oh,
novel
yeah.
that it goes in. And yeah, it's tricky. It's a hard
Yeah.
process, you
I
know.
I love that you go there because it's excruciating.
Oh, horrible.
And I
I'm
find
brilliant,
that
but
that's the
horrible.
thing that's missing from so many writing courses. So that's why people get to turn to people like you and book coaches and things like that. It's because it requires stamina and resilience and encouragement and feedback and all these things that a typical writing course doesn't cover or offer, and it's such a
It's
big
not as
part
easy
of it.
as it looks, and it doesn't even look easy. You think about it. The whole notion of creating a cast of human beings and creating a world that they can slot into, and then making sure that they are psychologically linear, and then lobbing a series of hand grenades into their world and seeing where they land and describing and deciding whether or not the reader needs to care whether their socks match or whether they drink from a teapot or a cup. That those all of those decisions, the idea that you can just do that while you're busy, while you're doing the dishes, or driving the kids to school and stuff. It's no, it's concentration, and it's essentially putting other parts of your mind out there into the ether and considering so many different aspects of these people and how they might interact with one another. And yeah, it's a big and scary and laborious process, but it's also brilliant because you are literally creating something that wouldn't exist if not for you. You are taking a blank piece of paper and turning it into something that can make a stranger cry. I mean, I can't think of anything greater than that. That's what a privilege, when you
Mm,
to know that there are people who go to bed at night and decide not to watch some dreadful episode of some crap on TV, so they can go and spend a chapter with these strangers that you've created. I think that's marvelous. It just so I feel an endless sense of responsibility that those characters are authentic and well rounded, and as if they could be living a life outside the page, and that
mm,
this little anachronistic thing is a window into their world. You've been gifted the opportunity to see their lives and to hear their thoughts and to hear their heartbeat. And I think it's wonderful. I think
yeah,
I love the fact that stories still exist in this ludicrously old-fashioned words on a page manner. You know,
yeah.
you,
I
I,
love it.
it's it
I love it.
separates us from, well, you know what? It separates us into people who read and people who don't, and I think
Yeah,
that's an important distinction.
yeah,
I think there's a Venn
yeah,
diagram somewhere that has a series of overlaps, and the people who read and the people who don't, and they tend to match up with the people who really need to read. So
yeah. Love it.
yeah.
I love it.
As you can see, I'm quite evangelical about the importance of writing and reading.
I love it. I love it. Um, I'm going to dive into something practical here, which is how do you approach your stories? Do you have everything figured out? Do you do an outline and everything first? How much plotting and figuring out do you do before you get started? And then how closely do you stick to that?
I used to plot very, very closely, like intensely closely, and I'd have these big mind maps of what has to happen, the various ways that it was going to happen, descriptions of key points, and there was at the time that the life I was leading at the time, I kind of needed that. I needed that structure. Otherwise, I generally, it, I had so many good ideas, but they'd fall out of my head through the chaos of my life. Um, Now I have the echo of an idea. I have something that is it's not even a fully formed idea. I just have kind of a concept of something I want to explore, or I have a place, or I have a particular type of character, and I'll spend weeks and months imagining that character in a series of scenarios until eventually they become fully formed. And then I imagine, well, what's the worst thing that could happen to them, or what's the best thing that could happen to them, or
Okay.
how would they react to this particular stimulus, or what or even or conversely, I'll think of a crime, and I'll think, well, what kind of person would do that? and I'll work out what kind of person would do that, and then I'll think, well, hang on, why would they do that? And I'll work out that bit, and somehow it kind of forms into this great melange of ideas and concepts and people. But it only exists in my mind as a color palette. Really, I just know that I've got the bits I need to dip into to be able to start writing, and then I know that I've got a beginning, and I know what vaguely what the middle bit is, and I'll know that by the end, this person will be revealed. Um, but in terms of whereabouts do I drop the red herrings and where do I point the reader in another direction, that's kind of organic. That just kind of
Yeah.
flows. I'm forever grateful that we get to write on computers rather than a longhand or on PC, um, on a typewriter. Sorry, because can you imagine the editing process when you've got to go back and change everything? So no, it's like the virgin press of my guts goes into the
Yeah.
first draft, and then it's about making it into a good book, really.
When you're in the exploration of it, when you're just in the imagination part, are you writing in those
Not
moments or
not
on those
not
days?
sentences, but I am detailing idiosyncrasies and
Okay.
characteristics. Uh, I mean, a lot of people when and I've seen this on courses as well, and I don't agree with it. When people are talking about character, they talk about book character. I don't do that when I'm writing. I think about human beings.
Mm,
So I'm not thinking about the best silhouette, the best cookie cutter shape for my novel. I'm thinking about what is it about human beings that makes them remarkable, memorable, unique.
mm,
Uh, you know, so I'm constantly searching for people in reality that I can borrow characteristics from and make
mm,
somebody. I'm obsessed with psychological consistency. I hate it when I'm reading a book and people behave in a way that there is absolutely no indication that they ever would, uh, or or it'll just be accepted that people go nuts sometimes. And I'm thinking, "Well, what is this? 1890s. We understand psychology. We understand that people, if even if it's totally out of character, somebody within that novel has to remark upon how out of character it is,
mm,
so that and that in itself becomes an indicator of plot or of
mm,
motivation. So yeah, I think that the thing that I spend most time thinking on is the knock-on effects of each particular decision that I take.
mm,
So the idea that the way that they teach it on a lot of creative writing classes is that, you know, decide what kind of shoes they wear and build up from that. It just seems a little bit like you're dressing a doll. Whereas to me, it's like, no, how do they react if somebody cuts them up at the traffic lights when they're driving? Uh, what's their response if they open a drawer and there's a potato masher that's got jammed? Do they carefully put it back in, deal with that situation, or do they smash it off its hinges? If they smash it off its hinges, that's a really interesting person. Has nobody ever taught them you can't behave like that? Is something going on deep inside them?
mm.
Do they live alone? Are they doing this for effect? Are they a toddler having a tantrum? And I can take those thoughts for
Oh,
a lot
I
of
love it.
walks trying to
Yeah.
make somebody a real rational person.
Yeah, I
So
love it.
there's more thought goes into character than any other part.
And I'm going to shift gears for a moment. So let's moving into your memoir, Peace of Mind, that you wrote.
Oh yeah.
Um, how did you approach that differently or similarly, or what did you pull from all the work that you've done to write a memoir?
I never ever thought I would write a memoir. I thought of it as well. I feel as though I did feel as though you had to have done something of colossal significance to be able to tell your story. I thought, you had to have a moment where that rocky moment, where you overcome the odds and you achieve something. And real life of real people doesn't tend to give you that very much. So the only thing that I ever really felt was that I was quite proud of myself in a way for being somebody whose head isn't quite right, whose brain doesn't quite function the way that perhaps other people do. And the fact that I'm kind of still here and still living a relatively good life and achieving, and that I am what I set out to be, it kind of slowly over time I realized that that in itself was quite remarkable. But the last thing I wanted to do was tell a story about look, you can be like me. It's absurd, you know. No two people live the same life. No two people have the same circumstances. So the only way I could convince myself that there was merit in telling the story about my life was to tell the story of my brain, to tell the story of how it feels to be me, to tell you exactly what was going on inside my slightly damaged head at any one moment. So the way I approached it really was to think of my actual brain as a series of slides under a microscope, to literally take a slice of my reality and give everything, absolutely everything, all the worst parts of myself, every single spit and cough and thought that I was having in those moments, and just put it on the page and then never look at it again. Just get it out and look away. And I'm glad to say I've never read it back. I don't look at it. I don't it it I've got one copy in the house, and that's as far away from me as possible. It's like this little creature just full of my own darkness, like sort of just spitting at me from the corner of the room. But bizarrely, everybody who's read it, who's has got in touch with me, has said that it's uplifting and joyful and excruciatingly honest, and kind of life affirming. So it's amazing what people take from something that to you is something completely different. But
Yeah.
I think it was, people talk about the honesty of it, but there was no other way of telling that story. You know, if you're inviting people into your head to look around, what the hell? Who would lie? I mean, in those circumstances, why would you invite people into your inner sanctum and then put on a party for them? I mean, that's insane. So no, if you want to look around, but come in, but be prepared. You will leave. You will need to wipe your feet before you leave. That's basically the way I think of it. So it's not necessarily good for people to do it that way. They might prefer a more standard autobiography, but it was the only way to do it for
Yeah.
me.
So did you edit it? Did somebody edit for you? Was it one
A
and
friend,
done? Like you,
yeah, a friend I trust edited it for me, and my eldest daughter, she she gave it the thumbs up for public consumption, um, because obviously you're talking about very important emotional aspects of your life, and it was hugely important to me that I didn't. It wasn't a self-indulgent thing to do. That it would be like, damn the consequences. Uh, you know, I just wanted to check that it wasn't going to do anybody that I cared about any harm. Uh,
mm,
and she read it in its entirety, and it was the best thing I could have done, because
mm,
you know she basically said for the first time ever that she understood how it felt for me to to be in these circumstances and to live how I live and to think how I think. And for her to understand that was like nothing else. It was glorious.
mm,
And then at the other end of the spectrum, my mum, she didn't get to read it until it came out, and I was, you know, there's always that slight edginess with your parents, isn't there? And it was I didn't so much. I thought, well, there's lots about me that you find objectionable anyway, so no doubt you're going to hate it. But she got in touch with me and she'd read it in one sitting, and again she said, you know, I've these are the answers to all the questions I've always had. This is how I now understand. This is how it feels to be you. So it's kind of like a how-to guide. It's kind of an explanation as to, yeah, it would be nice for me to think that people consult the journal every now and again just to make
Mm,
sure that, but it does tend to slip out of people's consciousness once they've read it. But
yeah.
nevertheless, when people get in touch with me and say that they've read it because they wanted to understand a partner or a loved one, or that they have mental health problems themselves, but this was the first time they'd felt seen or understood. Yeah, that's
Mm,
marvelous. I just
mm-hmm,
it's just I try not to focus on the frustration of the fact that I'm not famous enough to have it traditionally published.
mm.
Uh, if I was
And that brings up a
independent and
great question
famous,
because there's a lot of people out there writing memoirs.
uh,
And so what was your experience getting it published, or what is
it
your
was. Oh, I knew from the start because 10 years in publishing, I know what they want, what they don't want. And there was no way anybody was going to publish a 45,000 word, excruciatingly honest mental health memoir by a mid-list novelist. They're just, you know, nobody's writing checks for that. So I knew that I'd have to publish it myself um,
Mm,
if I was going to get it out there. I never actually knew whether or not I wanted it to be a huge success or disappear without trace. I never actually made my mind up about that because there was good and bad to both scenarios. But no, I decided that if there was going to be the one thing I was going to do of any real, worth of, I know that writing novels is a good thing to do and everything, but it's a different thing. This
mm-hmm,
it might have been of help to somebody, so I wanted it to get into as many heads as I could. Um,
mm-hmm.
so the sense was I crowdfunded it. I
Mm.
set up a Kickstarter and told the world, or the very small part of it that cared, that I was doing this thing and I'd like to be able to get it published. I'd like to be able to have it there, out there for consumption, and couldn't believe it. The amount of people who put their hand in the pocket,
That's
helped it
amazing.
happen was extraordinary, really. I'm still a bit taken aback by it all, really. So now, it's a year since that came out. I've done as much as I can as a self-publisher, because I'm not very good at the
Yeah.
business side of things. I'm not very good at PR
How
and marketing.
Now you
So
have an agent? You have,
I did. I don't anymore.
okay.
I couldn't
When the
quite.
book came out, like I'm wondering how did it
No, no. And to be honest, even if I'd still had an agent, they wouldn't have taken it on. An agent. People have got a lot of misconceptions about agents, and there's a lot to be said for them. If you get a good one, brilliant. If you get one that's really hungry and really believes in you, brilliant. But they don't really represent you as a person or as a body of work. They represent certain books that they believe in and that you are almost attached to as a human being on the end of it. Um, so no, it was nobody was ever going to take it on. So I'd like it if one day you know, somebody at Random House was sat there looking through the memoirs and thought, "Oh, that looks good," and then decides to give me some money to publish it properly. But
Mm,
it was, if not, it's very
yeah.
difficult to change the world. Uh, it's best to change the parts of yourself that aren't working. Really. It's kind of the advice that. So it
And
would be
so
nice to.
you're in transition right now, and I'd love to um just talk about the agent a little bit. This is you know,
Yeah,
not just how to get an agent, but what do you look for? And this is fascinating what you're sharing with me now, that it's not so much about the writer, it's more about the book that
yeah,
they
yeah,
want to
yeah. Unless you
champion.
are, unless you are noteworthy for something else. If you've just won a gold medal at the Paralympics, then you are the story, and whatever story you write will be sold as you as an individual, or as somebody who has brand recognition. If you are a writer who has written what's hopefully a publishable, sellable novel, they'll they'll incorporate you into their marketing plan. But by and large, what they want is to be able to say, is to have a 30-word outline of what this brand new concept is that they're pitching, uh, and hope that the right people bite.
Mm.
Uh, and it's a tricky thing choosing the right agent, because you don't get that much say unless you are already hugely famous for either something else or you're known in your field, and you can have a quiet chat with somebody and say, look, I'm thinking that I'd like to be represented by somebody else. You've got to try and actually find somebody who might be right for you, and then persuade them to take you on. Now that is not a fair and balanced relationship in anybody's estimation, and that was the bit I struggled with for many, many years. Got on very well with the agents that I've had, very personable people, but I never really understood what it was that they were doing.
Mm.
I never really worked out why these gatekeepers to the publishing industry were there, you know, taking quite large amounts of money uh, to to essentially have the contracts drawn up that were either going to be signed or weren't.
Mm.
And I'm probably doing a massive disservice to what it is that they do, but I never felt as though there was a particularly fair balance of power.
Mm.
So I came to the conclusion that I was better having nobody to blame but myself, which is quite a healthy place to be, really. If you can hear a child crying, by the way, it's not. I haven't got anybody in the cellar. It's just bedtime for my 5-year-old. So
Oh yeah, yeah. It's late over there. I'll wrap it up. But well, I'm going to ask you two questions, and I'm going to wrap it up
I passed
for
away.
the quickie.
She's with her mum, I hope, or one of her sisters. So it's not my problem.
Okay, last question, and then I'll ask you something else. What makes a good story to you?
A good story is something that you have to share with somebody else. A good story is one that you literally, if there's nobody around that you know well, you will tell a stranger. It's a good story is something that starts with, "I've got to tell you this." Anything that is remarkable. I mean, there's this. It's slightly trite, but if nobody speaks of remarkable things, they're not remarkable.
Mm.
So that's kind of my watchword. Uh, I mean, I'm the worst at telling other people what my books are about. I never know. I can't write my own blurbs. I can't. Usually, what I think my books are about and what my publishers think they're about are completely different things. Uh, so it's really difficult for me to tell people that whole elevator pitch. Well, it's about
Yes.
this. Uh, but yeah, it kind of comes down to uh, something that's just intensely interesting.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
my story boils down to, you know, kid decides he wants to be a novelist when he grows up, overcomes lots and lots of obstacles, becomes a novelist when he grows up. That's my story. How many chapters, how many footnotes, how I tell that story, that's the art of the creative. But the
Yeah.
story is that.
I love it.
So
I love it. And David, just to wrap up today, what are you working on next? I know you have a lot going on. So
oh,
tell us what
stupid.
you're working on. Where can we find you?
I work very hard at not working very hard. It's extraordinary. I do like 70-hour weeks, so I don't have to get a 40-hour a week job. I don't understand it myself. Um, so at the moment, I'm writing what will be the 13th in the McAvoy series, uh, available worldwide. Although I've never sold Canadian rights, so there's a job for you. Um, and I'm busy promoting a book called The Whispering Dead, which is coming out here in a couple of weeks and overseas in about a month. That is a kind of a spy novel set in the 1960s, but it's also, well, underneath that, it's kind of an exploration of what would happen if the terrible things that the West does in little out of the way pockets of the world, what would we do if it followed us home? Uh,
Oh,
kind of the vibe, because let's be honest, sometimes you look at world news and you look at our involvement in it, and you immediately feel suspicious, um, it, as though you're only getting half the story. So I kind of like the idea of, what if the things that we do in the shadows suddenly started happening in shadows in this country, or
Love it.
turned up on your doorstep. So that book's called The Whispering Dead. That I don't know if the same cover overseas, but that's The
Oh,
Whispering Dead.
great.
Uh,
Oh, I love it.
yeah, look at me, professional and everything. I actually brought a book. I know.
Oh my God, Dave, I could do this, but you have a 70-hour work week that you need to move forward with.
Oh,
So,
it's not really work, is it? It's either talking, thinking, and writing. I mean, really. Uh,
I love chatting with you. Thank you so much for being with us today. Those of you who are here, stay on. I'm just going to wrap up the recording, and we'll have a quick Q&A. But David, thank you so much for being on the show. What's the website? Can people pop on to a website and find you?
oh yeah, www.davidmarkwriter.co.uk.
Okay, great. I'm going to add that in the show notes as well. So thank you, David. Thank you all for being here today. And stay tuned for more Power Story. We've got workshops and more author talks, and we'll see you soon. Bye.